Welcome to the Dear Entitled Radio Show with your hosts Nick Beardsley and Javi Mello.
Welcome everyone. We are back today introducing an artist, Andy Kutner, who goes by the project name Aftermyfall and is signed to Welcome Records. This year, Andy dropped an EP titled A Future of Meaningless Tomorrows, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So kind of just jumping right into really the material and how you work. When it comes to creativity, you being under the DIY project of Aftermyfall, you're a one-man show at the moment, right?
Yeah, correct.
And obviously I've seen a little bit out there on socials. You're looking to kind of pick up and go to live shows, right?
Yeah. Let me backtrack a little bit. So when I started this, it was kind of just like me, refining my love for like hardcore and metalcore and stuff like that, coming out of, because like for a while I was kind of in like the electronic realm, like producing electronic music and playing shows, like DJing, doing that. And after a while, I just kind of like got out of it. Like I wasn't really feeling it anymore. Like it didn't really feel like genuine to me. And like I was like throughout that whole process, like I was simultaneously like listening to bands and stuff like that. And I don't know, like every day I just kind of was like, man, I just like really need to like dive back into this. And then finally, like at a certain point, I just took the plunge, like stopped making electronic music, started picking up the guitar again, like learning like recording and like all this stuff, like how to like actually produce this stuff. And this was around, I think 3 years ago, like very early 2019, this all started. And yeah, it's just been like a never ending process from there. And like, back to the topic of like forming, like, you know, doing live stuff and like all that. I always like, I wanted to just like start a band, but I had been out of the scene for so long and like I didn't really like know anyone. And I'm very impatient when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I just started producing, and we're at the point now where it's like, yeah, like time to play shows, you know?
Gotcha.
So
is that more of a personal, it's time to play shows decision, or do you have a collective in the works that you're all together already and saying, yeah, let's go?
It was a personal decision. I mean, like shows were always like on the horizon for me. Like I knew eventually, like, I mean, that's like the goal, you know, like metal and hardcore. It's like, it's experienced live. Like, that's like the caveat of all of it. But it took a while for me to kind of figure out exactly what I wanted to do. But I mean, at the end of the day, it really just came down to like, I finally found some people that were willing to hop on. And right now we're kind of in the process of just like getting to the point of like rehearsals and stuff like that. So, you know, when bookings come around, we can accept those for this coming year and stuff like
That's
that.
awesome.
So a band is being formed around the project. It's still very like loose right now. Like I'm open to the idea of like just turning it into a band and like, you know, do conjoined writing and stuff like that, because the people that I have right now hopping on are like good friends of mine, and pretty much all of them are producers themselves and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of playing it by ear right now, but the main goal right now is to just get in a room and start rehearsing so shows can happen.
Absolutely. And so some of your background, obviously you said you were in the like the electronic scene for a little bit. You did quite a few collabs, which is absolutely sick. And I didn't catch all the dates, but I'm assuming that some of your collabs did that come just within the 3-year window of you actually being Aftermyfall and hopping on things? Okay.
Yeah. Like all of those collabs for the most part are just like friends of mine.
That's really cool.
These are all people that like I knew from like the electronic, like EDM scene. And most of them, like what I've like come to realize is like everyone like in like EDM, or for like the most part, like fucking loves metal and like wants to like somehow like incorporate metal into their music. So like when I started doing this, like a ton of like people like I know like knew from that scene like started hitting me up and were like, dude, like let's like write something, you know. And yeah, made a lot of cool music that way.
Yeah. I mean, you literally stole my line of questioning right out of my mouth. I love it because the collabs are amazing. I was listening to it just before this, Subliminal with, what is it,
yep.
Hades and, how do you say the name? Craymac?
Craymac, yeah.
Craymac, okay. I literally can't get that song out of my head, and you're on that too, and it's just like the right touch of heavy, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So, like, huge shout out to everyone involved on that and the collab in general.
Yeah.
So with the collabs though, like it's dope. Electronic is like that. When it comes to metal and the hardcore kind of side, obviously there's collabs that happen there too. Mm-hmm. For you though, kind of straddling the genres, how do you look at collabs? Like creatively, obviously it drives some growth for you, right?
Yeah, for sure. Whenever like I go into collaborations, because that was such a predominant thing in like the EDM sphere, and I like got really privy to like how to properly collaborate with people through doing that. Whenever like nowadays, whenever like I go into a collab, I have to have some sort of idea in mind, because I find that like if you just kind of like jump into a collab, like, hey, like let's just write something, most of the time it doesn't really go too well. I like to really approach it by like looking at like, first of all, being a big like a fan of the person's music, and then kind of being well versed in like what makes that person's music them, and then really kind of just like come to like some sort of like idea of like what would be cool as like some sort of like crossover or whatever. Like the best example of that is my collaboration with Brothel, who makes wave music, witch house, like just alternative music. And he's like a really good friend of mine. And we talked a lot about like shoegaze, like he's super into shoegaze and stuff like that. And like going into that project, we were like, it would be really sick if we made like wave in like shoegaze, like a thing, like shoegaze with like respaces and like very atmospheric like synths and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the basis of like going into that collaboration. So like that kind of process is how I go into collabs nowadays.
That's cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. You do your background research.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was gonna pretty much piggyback off that, saying that you're going into it looking at it instead of, let's just come up with something cool. You're like, well, what can I actually add to this? And if you can't really add, you're probably most likely to turn it down. Like, I don't think I can. Yeah.
It's hard when you get roadblocked, and that usually happens when like there's no idea in mind. You're just like, and don't get me wrong, like greatness can come from like just hopping into like a session and just fucking around, and then like you come up with something. But I find it doesn't really work that well for me personally, by doing that.
Same.
Yeah. That's very intriguing because I know a lot of things in just organic growth as a up and coming DIY. Everyone's like, oh, collab, know your scene, know your community. What advice, I guess, would you give to other artists? I mean, I think we heard a little bit of it right there, but, do you have anything specific going into collabs or looking to do collabs that you might give?
I guess like the real like answer to that would just be shoot your shot, like you never know what could happen. Like find people. I mean, obviously, like if you're just up and coming and then you reach out to some massive band or whoever may it be, it probably is not going to happen. But find people that are kind of like in the same realm of you, maybe doing the same thing, maybe up and coming themselves, and just start working with people that you actually like. That's like the biggest thing. Because it's very easy, like in the EDM world, it's very easy for people to just like work with people because someone has something going on, and like I don't ever co-sign that. It's like only work with people that you genuinely enjoy their art, and go from there. And like just send a message. You never know
about the art. Yeah, it's about the art, not the clout, for sure.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I can get behind that completely. I know that we were chatting before the podcast started. I know that this happens quite often, and it's cool. So we touched on the fact that you are also an audio engineer and that you do your own stuff. So I had a couple questions regarding that stuff. I know that you do it all yourself. Excuse me.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like do you also do work with other clients as well, or is it just only you that you've dealt with this?
Like in terms of like audio engineering, like
Correct.
mixing
Yeah,
and mastering,
producing.
yeah, like I have in the past, and I do whenever people approach me for that type of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, most of the time it's usually like electronic stuff that I've done. But yeah, I definitely have taken like client work in the past for audio engineering.
Is it, well, okay, so I guess my next question, it's something that I kind of struggle with a little bit myself, being an audio engineer too. Do you like, see, because I'm a little bit different. Like, obviously you produce your own stuff and you've produced for clients before. For me, I feel more pressure producing client stuff than my own stuff. But for most people, it's the other way around. I mean, do you experience that at all too?
Yeah, I mean, like more pressure for when it's like you're producing for other people than your own
Correct.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, totally. Because
I'm not alone.
like, I mean, when it's your own stuff, like you have the ability to just kind of like sit and reflect and like, you're your own critic with that shit. But when it comes to client stuff, or it's like you're trying to make sure that everyone's happy. It's a ton of pressure. But I feel like the easiest way to get through that is just to be as transparent as possible and try to get as much information like from your client as you can, like initially before you start, and keep them updated on your progress, and make sure to be like, listen, like, here's my first draft. Let me know if there's anything you want me to change or anything you don't like or things that you do like, and just go from there. Yeah, like honesty and like transparency is like the easiest way to like avoid any sort of confrontation with clients and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I mean, and like I said, I'm glad that I'm not alone in this. Most guys that I talk to, I've got a whole, group of like buddies of mine that are also doing the same thing as we are, right? And for them, it's actually the other way around. They make it more about like, oh, it's so much harder to produce your own stuff than other people's stuff. But I've just never felt that way. So it's kind of cool to see that I'm not like totally alone.
Oh no, you're definitely not alone. Yeah. I mean, there can be pressure. I mean, like there sometimes is pressure in producing your own stuff. Like obviously, like self-doubt and like, and stuff like that is going to be there.
Absolutely.
Because when it comes to like your own art, like you're always going to like be your biggest critic. Like I like, if I'm like speaking like honestly, like there's not one song I've ever released that I'm like 100% content with. It just gets to a point where you're like, I really like this. Like at this point in time, like it's time to stop working on this before I fucking destroy it. Like that's usually how it goes, Yeah. Because you can work on something forever, but like it will never come out. And like you might ruin it eventually by doing that as well. So
no, you're absolutely right. It's like you're never really done. You just have to know when to let go, and that is possibly like the hardest part in all of this is just knowing when to let go, man. Just it's done. That's it.
Yeah,
as done as it can be.
I usually, also sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say like usually it gets to a point where it's like I physically cannot work on this any longer. Like I am just tapped out. Like I'm done. Like that's usually the point where I'm like, okay, the song's done. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I also feel that even sometimes as more of a, let's say I'm a music consumer more than a creator. Right. And I think even on my end of things, maybe it's sometimes the mistakes, let's call them, that you see, or you're like, oh, that's not quite there, but I have to leave it. Yeah. Sometimes that's someone's favorite part. Oh, and I think that's the coolest part of music,
Yeah, definitely. Like music is subjective. So like what you think is a fuck up could be like something very interesting, like you were saying. And also there's like something to that. Like as the years go by, I'm kind of realizing that like perfect isn't always like the best thing, like making everything super fucking perfect. Like nowadays, like I'm kind of taking an approach where I'm like, well, sometimes like obviously like make your music sound good. But I'm finding that like the little mistakes and stuff like that is what make it yours. You know, it's what makes it sound live. It's what makes it sound real. Like you don't want it to be too polished.
Yeah. Most like real artists, I guess. What's the word I'm looking for? Artistic inclined opinions and minds also say that quite a bit. Some of my favorite producers that I follow, they say that there's a lot of perfection in the imperfections, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like use it to your advantage. Like it's
absolutely,
what makes it raw and
absolutely.
real. I mean, it all depends on like what type of music you make, but like especially in the world of like metal and hardcore, it's like like those imperfections is what makes the shit rip, you know? Like it's what makes it sound real.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And you know, that actually kind of piggybacks to another question I had regarding this. So I know that you said that, you know, obviously you got to keep like some sort of like bar, right? It can't be below the bar either. There's got to be some sort of like internal gauge, I guess, where you're like, okay, this is not perfect, but this will definitely represent what I'm doing the way that I want it to be represented. Obviously, you want your stuff to sound the best that you can make it at the time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or, you know, so my question is like, you know, what's your opinion on, like, for example, not just the audio, the sonic side of things, but like visuals and stuff? Like, so you being a DIY artist, how would you, if you were to give advice to other people trying to do the same thing, would you advise them that, you know, this stuff is important, or is it just more focused on the song and just make sure the song's the best it can be and that's it and things will come from that? Or do you feel like they need to have everything up to par, especially like visuals across all platforms, those sorts of things?
Visuals are extremely important. Like the whole overview of like who you are as an artist is important. Music, like having good music is just only, like in my opinion, having good music is just one step of the race, you know? You need, like nowadays, especially with things like, I mean, like I hate this side of things, but it's just the truth of the matter. It's like, nowadays with things like TikTok and like Instagram Reels, like all of that shit, like you really have to like get someone's attention, and it's surprisingly hard. So having some sort of like raw, like interesting visual aspect to go along with your music to kind of express who you are as an artist is extremely important in my opinion. And like, I'm someone who loves music videos. Like anytime singles drop, I will go watch the music video before I listen to it on Spotify or anything like that. Because like, it's just like the best way to experience like the point of the song, you know? Right. Having that visual element just makes it so much easier to digest. And, you know, I mean, like that's pretty much it. Like visuals are extremely important. And having like a good understanding of what you want to do before you start doing it is also very important.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more. I'm of that same mentality as well. I've just heard them both. You know, I've heard both ends of the spectrum. Yeah. Like, oh, you know, it's all about having a good song, or like having good songs, and it's really just kind of about that. But I'm like, well, if you're kind of like releasing a good song that sounds subpar because you didn't bother to get like somebody, you know, to mix it correctly, unless, you know, in your case you could do it, your stuff sounds great. So unless you could do it yourself, you know. You didn't bother to get somebody to do that. You didn't get proper artwork. You just didn't take promos that looked okay, you know? Like, at least on that gauge that we talked about earlier. Like, I feel like it's a waste, you know, at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's also, like, the idea of, like, you don't want to try too hard, which is, like, totally fine. Then just lean into that. Make that your thing, you know? Where it's, like, have good music, but, like, be the, like, type of entity that's, like, oh, like we just do this shit for the fucking passion, you know?
Right.
But you
Let
have
the music
to
speak.
Yeah, you have to convey that somehow though. And that's when it gets into the like waters of like, well, it's kind of hard to do that when like you don't have like visuals represent that, or like you're maybe not so active on social media and stuff like that, because like that's like the world we live in nowadays. But on the counterpoint to that, I guess, would just be like, if you're not gonna like do that, then just fucking rip shows. Like if you have like a killer fucking live set, then you're gonna do well regardless, you know?
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I can attest to that. I've had some friends of mine who, even now in this social media age era that we live in, they don't really have much of a social media presence, yet they annihilate, dude. And like people know about them word of mouth. They pack houses, and it's because they kill it live.
Those are the people that go far. Like, I mean, fucking look at Gulch, dude. Like, Gulch
Oh my
fucking
God.
just blew the fuck up off of like I think it was like some like shitty video of like a house show, like or some shit like that, and they blew the fuck up, you know. And like the band is like, obviously their music fucking rips, but like they're so well known because their shows are fucking crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even their video. Like, that's just it. It was like a fan video that just populated and did the marketing for them. Which is
That's a really good, but see, that's a really good point, and I like that because I've never heard it that way until just now, where it's like, you know, and if you're not going to be that active, then make sure your live show's like,
exactly.
You know? That's
it's like there's
cool.
like two like counter sides to it, you know, or it's like either like go really fucking hard on like visuals and like making crazy art and shit like that, or just like make good music and then just fucking rip shows, or do both. You know, like I feel like everything should be incorporated. Like you shouldn't hold yourself back by any means. Like art is art. Like just make dope shit.
Yeah.
Like that's like my mindset for it.
Well, piggybacking off that, Andy, I know that we said art is art and all that stuff, and I couldn't agree more there. But do you ever find yourself like while writing your stuff, like struggling between this is my representation, this is my art versus staying current?
Oh yeah, totally. I tend to like jump around a lot in terms of like what I exactly want to do. And yeah, there is that like bar of like current standard, but it depends because there's like a lot of shit that's current on like a lot of different ends of the spectrum, you know? Like I like, for instance, like Spirit Box is fucking massive right now. I fucking love Spirit Box, but I don't want to write music like Spirit Box, you know? But you know, and then but on the other end there's bands like Loathe and stuff like that are making like huge rounds right now, and like Static Dress and stuff like that, where like I actually see like try to draw some inspiration from. But yeah, it's just kind of like it all becomes a lot like pretty taxing on the mind. Like the more that you think about it, like you really like try to like, you know, nail it on the head, but I've kind of just come to the conclusion that it's like, you know, just make shit. Like, just make what you like and, like, go from there, because that's going to be, like, your most authentic shit is the stuff that you're like, I like this, so I'm just going to make this. Like, I don't want to, like, try to, like, be current or anything like that. I'm just going to make what I want to write, you know?
I mean, that's great advice, and it does translate into your music. That's one thing Nick and I were noticing. They're like, holy crap, man, like, this stuff, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like it's really kind of hitting you in the feels in a sense, and you're kind of feeling it. Like you're feeling truth speaking from, you know, from his mouth. Like you're kind of feeling this. It's not just one of those like, turn it on, cool, all right, sounds great, great production, great everything, move the fuck on. No, it's like replay value. It's got that going on. Yeah,
I
dude.
appreciate that.
Right.
Of course.
I was just about to say, like, you talking about one or the other, you do both. Like you do it, like your music videos are on point. Like, and now I just sound like I'm talking the guest up, and I'm sure that's gonna happen so often. But it's true. Your music video, I think it's Lockjaw is the video, like in that little cathedral there, which is incredible. If you have not seen that, like people go check that out. I will have that linked. If you know your music in general, like personally, I'm obviously I stumbled across you. It might have been a Spotify recommendation or something, and which I'm so thankful for. And it was I don't know, I'm a sucker for the raw emotion. I'm a sucker for just like there's intensity in your music, which I really think obviously stems from an electronic side. Like there's dynamic scoops and forces, but then the lyrics come in and go, wah! Like just like completely take you off guard and like lowers all your barriers. I mean, it's one of those things that just you do both, and I'm very impressed by that.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my like, whenever I go into like writing anything, it's like, how do I put this? I just always want it to sound as authentic to me as possible, and also try to make it meaningful in any capacity. I'm not a big fan of just like making shit like with no intention, you know, like all of my songs have some sort of meaning behind it, whether it's lyrically or like sonically. But yeah, kind of like everything I write is pretty much fucking miserable, in the sense of like
Sad boy crew.
it's just transparent emotion of like shit I've gone through. And yeah.
Yeah,
After truth, yeah.
and that's where After My Fall stems from, because like your Spotify bio and some of your previous interviews, you've stated that the name stemmed from what you consider a personal stumble or a fall, and now you're rebuilding out of that, and the lyrics tell this story.
Yeah, for sure. After My Fall, like as I mentioned, like 2019 when it started, that was right after like a pretty dramatic experience happened in my life, like pretty life changing. And it was around the same time where I was like I said, like I was just getting out of electronic music and I didn't really know what to do. And I started to write this music again, like metal and hardcore. And it just kind of brought me out of that, you know, like my funk, like being involved, like with what I was going through. And every time like I wrote music, it just made me feel a little bit better. And that's when After My Fall came into play, the name, because it really did feel like my redemption arc, so to speak, where like, okay, this is like everything after like my fall.
Yeah.
Like this is like the path forward and like speaking on like the shit I've gone through and stuff like that. So.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's you wouldn't want to necessarily jinx it, call it victory lap either.
No.
Not just yet.
Not yet.
Well, you'll get there. You'll get there.
Yeah, but that shows the authenticity you're talking about. You're going for truth. I actually saw a documentary last night on a producer. I don't know if I can say it on the podcast or not, but maybe. Howard Benson. You guys familiar with that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard Benson. Yeah, he was talking about
the name. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he's now made a couple plugins and stuff for like the audio files out here, you know. But he's a really big rock producer. He's produced some of my favorite bands like Seosin and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah, dude, you know that song Faces or Voices?
Yeah.
Faces. Wow.
The fucking self-titled album, the Beatle on it.
That's the one, man.
Yeah. So much back in the day, bro.
Dude, yeah. So he did that, man, and he had this video that he posted that he was kind of like roasting people doing covers. He wasn't really roasting them, but he's being honest about it. He's like talking about people doing covers of songs he's produced, and the attention to detail this dude had, man. And there's one thing that stuck with me yesterday when I heard it, and it was like he gave advice to one of the people he judged, I guess. It was like, yeah, you're just not selling the part enough. I'm after truth. I don't believe that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that stuck with me. And I've heard that before, but I guess I needed to hear it again. And it just so happens that I feel like you're on that same kind of vibe, you know? Mm-hmm. Where it's definitely. Like, yeah, you're after that authenticity, that truth. You just don't want to put out shit just to put out shit. And I love that. I think that's great. And it shows.
Yeah. I mean, I think vulnerability is like very important in music. You shouldn't like half-ass shit. You should just honestly just like, cause like when you really think about it, like if you're a musician, artist, whatever, like whatever art you're making, you're trying to leave your stamp, like your trail, you know, like this is what I did on my time on this earth. So why would you half-ass that? Like be real, be transparent, like talk your shit. That's like how it should be.
Yeah. Wow.
Always.
I love that. I mean, you said in 2019, you kind of said, hey, this is my redemption arc. I'm moving forward. Was that the moment you felt that, say, mainstream music needs to discuss this? Like, this is kind of my thing now. Like, I need to just get this to the world. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah. At a certain point, yeah. Because, like, I had been, like, releasing music throughout that whole thing, like because I've been producing music for around like 10 years at this point now. Right. And like I've been through like a whole array of genres, like trying different stuff out. But I definitely took a little bit more time to release something when I started After My Fall. But yeah, I mean, like right off the jump, it's like I just want to get this shit out there, you know, like regardless if it does well or not, like because at that point at that point I kind of like X'd out like any sort of like, I don't know, like connections I had or whatever, because I'm entering into like a different world now. Like I'm out of like EDM, electronic music, whatever. Like I don't know really anyone anymore in terms, like at that time at least, that like can help me push music and like metal and hardcore and stuff like that. So I was definitely stepping into like untapped waters, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was a bit scary, you know, like for the first time, like releasing the Aftermyfall stuff was like the first time I was ever nervous to release music, because before that, like I'd always heard people, they're like, oh, I'm so nervous to drop this song and stuff like that. Like, and I was always just like, why? But until like I wrote Aftermyfall stuff, I was like, oh, this is like extremely fucking personal. And like, yeah, I'm a bit nervous to fucking release this to the world. But at the same time, you know, like it feels good, you know, and like if there's like one person like out there that like listened to the song and was like, you know, I can resonate with that. Like I fuck with that. Like job well done. You know?
Yeah. And just to piggyback off what you were saying about how you like felt like nervous to release and stuff. Was it even worse because it was just you by yourself? You didn't really have a band, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it definitely made it a bit more nerve-wracking. Yeah, like, especially like when I first started, because like now I have like a bit of a team behind my back, which I'm extremely thankful for.
So important, yeah.
But at the time, it was really just like, I think I'm doing the right thing, like, you know, and there's like a lot of pressure in that. And definitely can be very nerve-wracking, yeah.
But you also... Sorry.
Apologies, go ahead.
But you also have, you know, you started in the electronic side, and if you talk to someone who started in metal, they're going to be like, oh yeah, Spotify, do this, 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 and this. Here's the list of what you need to do. You have SoundCloud, you have that kind of underground background, so to speak, that like, hey, that's one way to market, but now you're transitioning to this. So like that's also another thing of having that team helps you make this step now. But when you first started, am I doing this right even? You know, as simple as something as simple as that. Not that my heart's on my sleeve, but even is this process okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, I had friends like my old roommate Connor, who goes by the name of Levitate, who's a fucking genius.
Did your video?
Yeah, he directed and shot it for me.
That's awesome.
He also did the metal injection performance. I don't know if you saw that, but okay. He just destroys anything he touches. Like he's just insane.
In a good way, not destroyed.
In a good way. But you know, at the time I had, you know, I kind of like had him and some other friends like giving me pointers and stuff like that. 'Cause like I had a basic understanding at the time of like how to release music, but I would say like 2019 was like the real ramp up of like, okay, now it's like getting crazy where it's like TikTok and like all this shit is happening where it's like, I kind of got like lost in a sense where I'm like, I don't really know how to like actually push music anymore. Because for the longest time, it was just like, hey, write a song, drop it on SoundCloud through like a label or like whatever. And like, it just does well, you know, or like on YouTube. But then like, yeah, like Spotify, Apple Music, like all of that became like extremely predominant, and like it's very important to like hire PR and like getting like all that stuff going. And like I had no idea. I mean, like now, like thankfully I have an awesome publicist now. She's amazing. Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely like it took a while to get to this point, and it was definitely a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, and you've been in the scene similar to Javi long enough that you've seen that arc. Spotify was like nothing in 2011, 2012.
Yeah. When it came out, I was like, what is this?
Right.
Personally, SoundCloud, like
personally, I refused to use Spotify because I was like, no, I'm going to buy the artist's music. And then it's like, people just like, oh, it's on Spotify, no CDs. Where are my CDs? Yeah. Where are my MP3s?
Yeah, I miss that. No, yeah. I miss like the CD era of things. Cause like you're talking about being a scene kid, like that was the shit. Yep. It was like, oh, they got the Redeemer CD. Like, yo, I'm getting that. Like, Homesick, A Day to Remember. Like, getting that. Just, like, having like all of these CDs. Like, it's a booklet. Like, I'm so mad. Like, I don't have like all my old CDs. Like, I lost them over the years. But like, there's like some discovery to that, you know? Because nowadays you can just like hop on Spotify and just like instantly learn about any artist you want. But back in the day, like you kind of had to like take a plunge because you're spending a little bit of money for an album, you know?
And we all had the regrettable albums that were like, wow, why did I spend that money? And then others, like we did, you know, oh, that album art looks cool. Oh man, the music is just not my thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, back on the topic of visuals, it's like, how many albums did you buy because you thought the album art was sick?
Yeah.
You know? Like,
I've been guilty of that. I bought a few.
It's important.
Will not name the bands, but I definitely I spun the shit out of that Homesick record, man. I don't think it works anymore. That was like one of my favorite albums.
That was like the magnum opus of that era.
Yeah.
Like
Dude,
at least
it was.
in like, the scene world. Like, and then Crabcore came around and it was like Attack came around.
Yeah.
Oh, the Warped Tour days, man. I mean, they weren't all bad.
No,
That's there was something you were talking about earlier just now, like in the spiel. You were talking about a team, right? Like you have a publicist, she's awesome and all that stuff. If you were to give some advice to up and coming bands or even artists like yourself, like I even work with one right now who is had his whole band bail on him. And I told him, hey, why don't we just keep writing? Because he came from the same place as you, where he's very honest about his lyrics and things, and great musician all around. And he trusted me to write. And over the process of almost a year, I would say, because it did take a little bit, right, between him and I, because we had to make sure things were good and and authentic. You know, we created something, and now he's getting ready to launch, but it is just him. He does not have a band. He has people that will play live with him and stuff, but like, do you feel that it's important, even if you're just coming out of the gates, especially being a singular member, to seek a team out? Or is there a point in which you say, now I need a team, but, you know, I don't need one to begin with? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, like, in terms of, like, things like publicists, like, a publicist would be, like, a good point of action for sure, because those are things that you can just seek out. Like if you have the finances for it, like you can totally hire a publicist. Like you should always do that if you have the funds for it. But in the world of things like management and agencies and stuff like that, you got to wait for them to come to you. Because I find it's very rare for people to just point blank, like be like, hey, manage me. And then like it actually happens, or like that with like agencies and stuff like that. Management and like agencies and stuff like that, that will come when the time is right, because they will see what's happening, they'll see the attention, and then they'll want to be a part of it, you know?
Right. And that obviously revolves around you building your presence, building your community, being that whatever you want to be. Do you want to be kind of like the, you know, it circles back to exactly what you were talking about to begin with, you know, figure out who you are, what you want to look like, and do your thing. Is it live shows? Is that where management's going to see you and pick you up? You know, that type of thing. Yeah,
for sure. Or it could just be the music. That's basically how like I got with my manager. He was shown my music. Well, actually, he was shown like a little side project thing I've had under the wraps with Levitate, who I was talking about for quite some time. It's just like, it'll come out eventually. Okay. I don't want to say too much about it yet, but it's like crazy fucking just like psycho shit. But he was shown that and instantly wanted to get involved.
That's cool.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes it could be as simple as that. If someone like that's, I mean, I feel like that's how like you find like a good manager too, is someone that just fucking like sees something in you or a band, and just wants to get involved and like wants to make shit happen, you know? Yeah.
And I'm sure that was going back to connections and word of mouth. I mean, it's not a matter of necessarily who you know, it's how you treat the people you meet. Because the impression there is, oh man, you know, this guy, check this out. You know, that's how any music spreads. You know, that's just the marketing industry right now, and that's what the genre, Spotify, all digital, same thing. You can't hand a CD to someone on the street and be like, yo, go spin this.
There's still people doing that in Hollywood, I'll tell you what.
I believe
Oh my God. I went
I'm
to
like, every
NAMM.
time, dude. I'm like, do you have Spotify? Like, stop shoving a CD in my hand.
All right,
like,
give me a QR code or something.
Yeah, like, just give, like, what's your Spotify? Like,
I went to NAMM and they were peddling. There were artists outside of NAMM just peddling CDs, man.
Like, I respect the hustle, but it's
Same.
There's better ways of doing it now. Like, just give me like you said, like a card with a QR code on it or something, like, and I'll check you out.
There are generations that will probably tune into this show that are like, dude, I've never seen a CD player in my life. So
Damn, this makes me feel old.
I know. I put myself in that category right by that statement.
It was a good time though. It was sick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you and I had talked, kind of setting this whole thing up, and a lot of what we want to focus on here is your inspirations. I mean, you've obviously named a few, and you're very in tune with the scene, especially the metal scene. In terms of the ones we were discussing, you had given me Casey, Loathe, The Soft Moon, and then you and I bonded over the Boundaries album. Like, good God, sure. Like it's all of those artists are phenomenal. I mean, is there, like, can you kind of dive into some aspects that you pull from those artists or even those tracks?
I'll start with like Casey. I first discovered Casey just by like how I discovered like a lot of music actually is just recommendations on YouTube. And the Love Is Not Enough album, I think it's called Love Is Not Enough.
I believe so. Here, I'll double check.
Popped up, and like I'm pretty sure that Bloom is the first track on that, and it just kind of like blew me away. Like just how fucking like aggressively sad that shit is.
Yep.
It just felt so real to me. Which, like, going back on like what I was talking about before is like I like authenticity in my music. Like I want to like hear your sorrow, it's like when I listen to music and stuff like that, like if that's like the direction you're taking and stuff like that. And Casey is just one of those bands where I'm like, this is like some of the realest shit I've ever heard. Like this just feels authentic to me. Right.
Yeah. And then there's, like, I was talking to Javi, he was mentioning, I think it reminded him a little bit of Being as an Ocean, or for me, it was a little bit Defeater in that specific track, and
definitely.
Hot take, old The Ghost Inside.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There you go. So, yeah, right. Exactly. Feeling that crushing emotion, I absolutely see that come through in your stuff.
And another thing that's like about it is like, it's kind of like a little bit of an older record. I think it came out at like 2016, 2017 or something like that. And like going back on like how like unpolished it is.
Yes.
Like I just make like I feel like I wouldn't like that record as much if it was like completely polished to modern day standards, Like the fact that it's so like just raw, like just makes it like hit so much harder in my opinion.
Right.
Dude, you know what's crazy that you say that? It's because I purposely right now, even now when I'm producing just like active rock stuff. Yeah. There are certain things with the guitars and the bass and even in the vocals that I purposely will not edit.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want the snapshot of you. A snapshot. Can't even say that 5 times fast. It's not a snapshot of what you were able to do at that time and how you were feeling. That's what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
So I completely can get behind that, you know what I mean? Yeah. And you can mask some of it with today's modern standards, but when you're doing too much, it's like you said, it becomes so sterile and you can hear it and it doesn't translate that well.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't hit me,
Sterile's a good word for that, yeah. Like you do too much, you lose the flavor of it,
Completely.
Right.
Completely.
And it bounces back to exactly what we're talking about. Leaving those little quirks in the music sometimes is what makes it.
Make it real.
And you have obviously mentioned the shoegaze aspect. whether you're growing into or you're trying to incorporate, you have some in your music currently, but
Yeah, a lot more in my unreleased, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always been into like alternative, like grunge, like shoegaze. Shoegaze was something that I kind of like started to dive into like more, at least like aggressive shoegaze, like things like I guess like parts of like Loathe, and then bands like Slow Crush and stuff like that. Yeah, like so like growing up in Seattle or like around the Seattle area, like as a kid, like that's like all you would hear on the radio. It's like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So like, it's very like nostalgic for me. That's why like Soul Blind is like one of my favorite bands right now, because it's just like hitting that sweet spot of like nostalgia for me. It's like, wow, this is like taking me back to like when I was like 8 years old in like the car with my dad, like going through Seattle, like listening to like Soundgarden on the radio, you know, like
yeah.
yeah, I just love that side of music.
I
and,
do
like,
know.
Really try to incorporate as much as I can.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously, Loathe just exploded on the scene, just capitalizing on a lot of that. You know, that there's huge foundations, because even in your video comments and your comments on social media, it's like, oh man, reminds me of Deftones. It's like, okay, if anyone knows that kind of style and grunge sound and the shoegazy formations.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, that's a huge honor. Like Deftones is definitely one of my favorite bands of all time. And it's like because of that, where it's like they got fucking riffs and they got the fucking like that like real raw like emotional shit too, you know? And like Chino Moreno is like an insane vocalist, like and sounds like no other, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say that the guy is not just insane, he's like so unique, man. Like there will never be anyone like him. Same thing with Jonathan Davis from Korn.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Hot take.
I don't know if that's a hot take. That just seems like a fact. Oh, but you know.
all right. I guess I don't know what hot take means, and I'm just addicted to saying that.
No, that's a good take.
Good take. It is a good take. So, and then the other track you had sent in was "Wasting" by the Soft Moon.
Yeah. Definitely a little bit different. The Soft Moon is an artist that actually my friend Brothel put me on to. I had never been into like anything 80s like music whatsoever, anything like kind of sounding like that, but man, that whole album, the Deeper album, what that song is on is just like, it's just so fucking cool. Yeah. It's just like the coolest fucking music, and like the way he just works atmosphere to like really like put you like in a scene, like in a movie in your head, you know, like, and just like the real like emotion to it. Like, it's just like so awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I love talking to you about this, man, Andy, because like you're able to look beyond the black and white part of it all. You know, you're able to look beyond just what's there, the surface level. You can go a lot deeper. You're noticing things and pointing out things that like they're not so easily spotted. You know, you kind of have to really feel music to kind of get it. Not trying to be like a gatekeeper or anything like that, but it's pretty cool, man.
Javi's just verifying the validity of you as a musician right now.
I mean, it translated in your stuff, man. So I already knew that, you know, you were not like, not that there's anything wrong with this, but you were not just some kid in a bedroom making music. Like you're an actual artist, and that's awesome. So
I mean, shit, I'm a music fan first, you know? The whole reason I started making music is just because like it went from like, hey, how did they do this, to like, okay, now I'm like EQing like fucking millions of guitars and shit like that. But like, yeah, I'm a music fan first. I just love to find dope art. You know? It's really just what it is.
Right. Now you hinted slightly, and I know we were talking kind of off air briefly about this. You hinted slightly here about new music, new content coming. What, I guess, what can you tell us about that? What are you allowed to tell us about that?
There's no release dates or anything like that yet. But I do have about an album's worth of music right now. It's not completely polished. Some songs are more polished than others. it will most likely be some singles before a body of work drops. But what I have right now is like, honestly, like, not to toot my own horn, but like, it's fucking sick. Like, it's like a mixture of just like gnarly beat down hardcore shit and like shoegaze and fucking like dark wave alt rock elements and stuff like that, and some songs too. I mean, it's just kind of like all over the place. Like,
You should feel that way.
Yeah.
You should feel that way. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, there will definitely be new music somewhat soon. Definitely like this in the new year.
Yep.
Nothing, like I said, though, nothing like solidified yet in terms of like release dates and stuff like
Right.
that. But
Absolutely.
it's coming.
So on a scale of, nothing to a future of meaningless tomorrows, it surpasses that, it sounds like.
In my opinion, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, A Future of Meaningless Tomorrows was actually like a lot of those songs, like the initial versions of those songs were written like 2 years prior to release.
Really?
Yeah. It kind of took a while to come out, and I had kind of revised a lot of it since then, just because it had been so long. It just sounded dated to me, and like I knew I could make it better and stuff like that. So everything I have right now, like this like album's worth of music, is pretty current. It's about like from like the last year of writing. So everything I have right now is definitely like my modern take on music in terms of like what I have been into in the last year.
Yeah. Well, so you saying that, I mean, the content is relatively 2 years old, so to speak. It sure doesn't sound like that. I mean, it's still, it's got that counterparts, like smack you in the mouth, kind of like, here's your lyrics. Like,
Still
sure.
smacks.
yeah.
Shout out Brendan Murphy.
Yeah, exactly. But that, so technically it kind of stems from, and I always like dread going back to the topic, but it has impacted the industry so much. It kind of stems from a little bit of the pandemic time too.
Oh yeah.
Like you were coming through your fall in 2019, then the pandemic came, which probably didn't help any mental state whatsoever. And then this happened.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the pandemic was like a huge reason as to like why it took so long to come out. Because as you guys know, it's like when that happened, like the entire industry shut down. It was like nobody like labels like didn't know. They're like, do we release music? Like, how do we even release music right now in this time and stuff like that? And it definitely caused the effect of taking a very long time to come out from that. But it also gave me a lot of time to like revise stuff and kind of become more knowledgeable about things in the production world, and like, grow my palette and like interests and like stuff like that in terms of like music and art and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not pissed about the time, it took to come out. Honestly, I feel like it was kind of necessary.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't even think like there would have been like a music video or anything like if it didn't take that long, because there was a lot of dialogue in between then that like led to that point and stuff like that. So
Yeah. A lot of that word of mouth, cross connections. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, a lot of artists shared that same sentiment too when the pandemic hit. I actually, my job as a writer and producer and all that stuff, I ended up getting a little busier than I thought I would. I thought that my career was done. I was like, oh, pandemic hit, it's done. No one's gonna. I'm not essential. No one's gonna spend money on coming to work with me. Boy, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And a lot of it. Yeah, and a lot of it was dudes in your same shoes where they were like, listen, we had this set to come out this year. However, we feel that we can make this more current.
Yeah.
And we can make this more this, more that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's work. That kind of, it was that kind of like back and forth.
It got a little bit of free time to like actually revise things and
the
stuff.
deadlines
like
just were not there.
Yeah, exactly. There's
when
like
you're
that
bound
freedom.
to deadlines,
Yeah. When you're working without the restrictions of like deadlines and stuff like that, it's very freeing because you can do things like that, like seek you out and be like, hey, we have this time now, and like we want to make this like what we've always thought this should be,
Right.
like we can actually do that now. So there was that aspect from the pandemic. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely, obviously a lot of positive and negatives that we don't want to dwell on, but both
For sure.
both have fed into really like we've been discussing it this whole podcast. It was a whole shift, even in you can see a trajectory from your career, your process coming back to metal from 2019 and now. It's a completely different world from crossing that decade point for multiple reasons. And now we obviously have all the new platforms, and it's different.
Yeah, it's definitely way different now. It's kind of like it's like at a point now where it's like weird to think about like pre-pandemic life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wait. Give me a couple more years. I think like maybe another year and a half. Like,
Well, we got pushed. I think everyone, excuse me, everyone got pushed into some sort of routine, especially those involved in music. Like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, my life pre-pandemic I wasn't following any kind of routine. It was just like wake up, go do my thing, go to bed, whatever. Now, ever since the pandemic happened, in order to kind of like align yourself more with what you had to do and just get stuff done, and be efficient, like I had to force myself into a routine, which I've now been keeping since, but I had to force myself into, and I feel like a lot of people had to do that.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was in the same way. It's hard to go from like essentially 2 years of like, hey, like you don't like have to do anything. Or matter of fact, like in the first year, it's like you're not allowed to leave your house. Like you have to do like nothing. Back into, hey, now like have a scheduled routine. Go to your day job. Like all of that. Like it's super hard to get back into that after that period of time. But it does feel good. Like getting back like on a normal schedule and stuff like that.
I agree.
I know it's
Certainly.
been a bit of time since the world has essentially reopened and stuff like that. But,
Yeah, right. Well, whatever that means, But at least there's shows, and you are looking to play shows in the new year, so that's kick ass.
yes,
So
for sure.
again, we really appreciate your time. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Is there anything, we talked new music coming, potential shows, anything else you kind of just want to let people know about, go check out? Obviously, we're going to have your links. We're going to have your music videos. We're going to have all that tied in. We're going to have your influences on here, all the goodies. Anything else you can kind of think of?
Yeah, I mean, go run up my last EP, A Future of Meaningless Tomorrows. It took 2 years to come out, so I would appreciate if you go listen to it. Also, new music coming. Like I said, I have like basically an album's worth of music written right now. And there will probably be singles before a body of work that comes out, but it will be coming out sooner than later. And as well as shows, like I mentioned in this, that I'm in the process of putting a band together. So the live aspect of things are in the works. So you can expect shows as well.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Well, we're thrilled to watch where Aftermyfall goes, and hopefully listeners go do exactly that. Run A Future of Meaningless Tomorrows up and through the roof. It's entirely worth it. And if you were, it stems. Personally, I can say if you were a scene kid, you're gonna love it. If you were an electronic fan, you're gonna love it. There's so much clash of dynamic. There's crossovers I know you've heard that this stacks up against, hands down. So,
And more importantly, the songs are just good.
yes.
Well written stuff.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah. So, again, thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch and let our fans know what you're up to next.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Cool.
Cool.
Dear Untitled, here for the artists supporting the creatives.